Greetings, and thank you for joining me today. I truly appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Your support means a great deal, and if you choose to subscribe, it would mean even more. Let's get started. I'm Desmond. My wife Sharon and I had been married for 2 years when things began to fall apart, faster and more unexpectedly than I ever saw coming. In the beginning, those first 2 years felt filled with promise. We shared a strong emotional and physical bond, or so I believed. We met at a professional event, and the connection between us was instantaneous. Sharon had traveled from out of state to attend the same conference. We quickly formed a connection during those few days. We exchanged numbers, kept in touch, and before long, we found ourselves in a long-distance relationship. Despite the miles between us, it felt like everything was aligning perfectly. Our conversations flowed easily, revealing a shared worldview, similar goals, and a genuine appreciation for each other's company. Every visit, whether I flew to her city or she came to mine, felt electric and deeply sincere. I was convinced this connection was strong enough to carry us into a lasting marriage. As we got more serious, Sharon made the move to my state. Our wedding was a beautiful celebration, surrounded by loved ones and filled with hope for the life we were building. For our honeymoon, we explored parts of Europe, France, and Italy, soaking in romantic experiences that only reinforced my belief that our future was bright. During our first year and a half, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Even with our demanding careers, we prioritized time together. I believed our intimate life remained healthy and fulfilling. We had recently moved into a more spacious home in a quiet neighborhood, and everything pointed to stability. I felt genuinely satisfied with our marriage. But then, around the 18-month mark, I noticed something had changed. Sharon had completely stopped initiating any form of physical intimacy. Before that, closeness had been a natural and regular part of our lives since she'd moved in. But suddenly, its absence became hard to ignore. At first, I assumed it was just temporary. Perhaps she was feeling overwhelmed or burnt out. She had recently earned a promotion and was juggling more responsibilities at work. I understood how stress can impact desire, so I tried to be understanding. But as time passed and weeks turned into months, it became harder to overlook. Not only did she never initiate intimacy, but she also turned me down whenever I tried to. Her rejections were never cruel or aggressive. She usually explained she was too tired, had an early day ahead, or suggested we just relax together instead. Taken individually, those reasons made sense. But when strung together, they hinted at a more persistent issue, a quiet erosion of the physical part of our relationship. I began paying close attention, trying to anticipate her moods or find moments when she might be more open. I changed my approach, timing my efforts to fit her schedule and energy levels, trying to be more sensitive to her emotional state. But no matter how carefully I planned, my advances were met with polite but unmistakable refusal. She didn't seem upset with me, but she also didn't seem interested in connecting in the way we once had. It started to feel like intimacy had become something she was deliberately avoiding. What hurt even more was the emotional detachment that followed. Our conversations became purely functional, focused on work tasks, household responsibilities, or weekend plans. The deep, meaningful exchanges we used to enjoy had nearly vanished. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. Maybe she was struggling with something personal, or maybe something about our marriage was troubling her. I tried gently to open up space for honest conversation, hoping she might let me in. But she kept reassuring me that nothing was wrong. According to her, everything was just fine. Eventually, one evening, after another stretch of surface-level interactions and emotional distance, I decided I couldn't keep avoiding the issue. After dinner, I asked her to sit down with me. I calmly shared what I had been observing, the growing gap between us, the lack of physical connection, and asked if something was bothering her or if there was something I should be doing differently. I spoke with care, emphasizing that I wasn't trying to accuse or criticize her. I acknowledged that there might be challenges in her life I didn't fully understand. Her response came quickly and with a sense of finality. She said nothing was wrong. She told me she was simply tired, less interested in intimacy than she used to be, and that I was reading too much into things. She insisted that fluctuations like this were normal in long-term relationships, but her explanation didn't line up with my experience. This didn't feel like a normal phase. It felt like a complete change in the way we connected, one that had been building for quite some time. Still, I chose to take a step back, giving her the space I thought she might need. I stopped trying to initiate intimacy so frequently, hoping that my patience might ease the pressure and bring us back into sync. But that strategy only seemed to backfire. The distance between us grew even more pronounced. Rather than interpreting my restraint as understanding, she appeared to see it as detachment. I felt stuck. When I made an effort, she pushed me away. When I held back, she seemed to view it as indifference. No matter what I did, the closeness we once shared continued to fade. Day by day, it felt like the woman I had married was slipping further away. The version of Sharon I had come to love, someone warm, affectionate, and emotionally open, seemed to be disappearing. In her place was someone who tolerated our life together, but no longer seemed to find joy in it. The emotional toll of that shift was immense. I began to question everything. Whether I was still desirable, whether I was a good husband, whether I had failed to understand her needs. I began to wonder if there was another person in her life, if her affection for me had faded, or if there were hidden cracks in our relationship that I had overlooked. I approached the situation from multiple angles, searching for a way to mend what felt broken. I planned romantic evenings, hoping to revive the intimacy we once shared so naturally. I took on extra tasks around the house, thinking that lightening her daily load might invite a renewed closeness. I surprised her with flowers, arranged special outings, and made a point of being more present and considerate. Still, none of it made a real difference. Though she acknowledged the gestures kindly, they didn't translate into deeper connection or restored passion. She thanked me for pitching in at home, but that appreciation didn't shift the emotional tone between us. Our dinners and date nights were pleasant, yet they ended like any ordinary evening, polite, distant, and missing any real warmth. Weeks passed like this, and I found myself increasingly discouraged. I cared for her deeply and longed to rebuild what we had, but my efforts felt futile. Worse still, they seemed to push her further away. One quiet Saturday morning, after another stretch of fruitless attempts, I decided to change my approach. Instead of orchestrating something grand, I waited for a quiet, natural moment. We had both slept late, and the calm of the morning made the world feel still. She lay beside me at ease, and I hoped that this relaxed, unguarded space might offer a chance to reconnect. Gently, I reached for her, hoping that the softness of the moment might rekindle something that once came so easily to us. But she didn't respond. She stayed motionless, her body offering no sign of interest. Where passion had once lived, now there was only distance. I kept trying, thinking that maybe with enough patience and tenderness she might respond. But then, without words, she removed my hand from her body. The gesture was quiet, but unmistakable. Firm and uninterested. It wasn't an excuse about being tired or stressed. It was a clear dismissal, and it pierced me. Stung by her rejection and needing clarity, I asked her directly what had changed between us. I had to understand why our intimacy had vanished. At first, she brushed the question aside, acting as though it were too early for such a conversation. But I couldn't let it go. I explained how much it meant to me, how lost I felt in her detachment. That's when the atmosphere shifted, her patience snapped, and what she said next would leave a permanent mark on our marriage. She turned to face me, her expression hard and filled with a frustration I'd never seen from her before. And then she said it. She didn't want to be intimate anymore because I had never satisfied her, not once, not since our wedding. She told me I always fell short, that I left her unfulfilled every time, that I simply lacked what she needed in that way. She had hoped it would improve, she said, but it never had. Her words weren't just about performance, they cut much deeper. They struck at my sense of self, my worth as a partner, as a man. It wasn't about technique or effort, it was a condemnation of who I was, and the pain was only intensified by how long she had kept this from me. She had never once voiced her disappointment. She had never hinted that she was dissatisfied or asked for anything to change. Instead, she had allowed me to believe things were fine, while quietly stockpiling resentment she now released with blunt cruelty. Her silence over the years felt just as painful as the words she finally spoke. In that instant, I shut down. The vulnerability I had brought into that morning dissolved. I pulled back, emotionally, physically, completely. I got out of bed and left the room without saying a word. That entire week I kept to myself. I went to work, came home, ate, and went to bed. I kept our interactions limited to the bare minimum needed to keep the household running. The man who had made effort after effort to reconnect had disappeared. In his place was someone who couldn't afford to be wounded again. Her words had created a divide between us that felt too wide to cross. Even later that week, when she tried to strike up familiar conversations, I found myself unable to participate. Everything she said reminded me of the cruelty I had endured, how she had reduced me to a failure in her eyes. Her voice echoed in my mind over and over. I dissected every intimate memory we'd shared, wondering how long she had been harboring this dissatisfaction. Had it always been pretend? Had she measured me against former lovers? Had she spoken to friends or family about it? Was someone else involved now? I didn't want to dwell on these questions, but they consumed me. The trust that once held us together had collapsed under the weight of a few brutal sentences. In its place, I began building walls, protective layers designed to keep me safe from further shame. The open, trusting man I had been began to retreat, replaced by someone colder, someone cautious. 2 weeks passed in cold silence before Sharon seemed to realize how deeply her words had scarred me. She began making efforts to restore what had been lost, cooking my favorite meals, suggesting we return to hobbies we once shared, trying to reignite the warmth that once defined our marriage. She eventually apologized, saying she had spoken in anger that morning. She said she regretted how she had said it, and she asked for forgiveness. She wanted to move forward, but for me it wasn't that simple. Her apologies grew more frequent and increasingly desperate once it became clear that I was unmoved by her attempts at reconciliation. She expressed sorrow for what she had said, but no expression of regret could undo the damage already done to our bond. Her words hadn't just wounded me, they revealed a deeper truth about how she regarded both me and our marriage. That realization couldn't be erased, nor could trust be rebuilt with apologies alone. I came to understand that intimacy with her would forever be tainted by those revelations. Every future encounter would be overshadowed by the weight of her confession, that she had never felt fulfilled with me. Though we continued living under the same roof in the weeks after her remorse, the gap between us only grew wider. I began seriously weighing the possibility of ending our marriage. What once had been a relationship built on affection and affirmation had transformed into a source of pain and self-doubt. The woman I had believed loved and desired me had made it clear that, in the most private part of our union, I was inadequate. Yet to leave would mean facing the truth that our marriage had failed, not only within myself, but also before our families and community. I couldn't stop imagining how others would view me if they knew the words she had spoken, that I wasn't enough as her husband. The disgrace of a broken marriage, combined with the humiliation of her disclosure, pressed down on me with unbearable weight. Night after night I lay awake, torn between the life we had built together and the bitter truth of what our relationship had become. I questioned endlessly whether she could ever be truly honest with me again. Could I trust her words? Could our physical bond recover? Could I ever feel secure and whole by her side? Each time I asked myself these questions, I reached the same conclusion. No. The wound was too deep, and the core of our partnership had been shattered beyond repair. She had revealed a side of herself I could not unsee, and I could not pretend otherwise. Even as she continued her efforts to win me back into the third week, I was preparing myself for a different ending. No matter what promises she made or how she tried to soften her earlier words, I realized the marriage had already collapsed. By the close of that third week, I did what I had resisted until then. I contacted a divorce lawyer to begin the formal process of dissolution. Meeting with the attorney was difficult, but necessary. I recounted what had happened and began to grasp the legal and financial realities ahead. The process might conclude quickly, or it could extend for years. But in truth, the marriage had ended the moment she spoke those cutting words that tore at my sense of self. After the initial paperwork was drafted, I gave it to Sharon one quiet evening after we both came home from work. I told her plainly that she deserved someone who could meet her needs, and I deserved someone who would not undermine my manhood at my most vulnerable moments. At first, she was stunned. Then came her pleas. She begged me to reconsider, dismissing her words as something said in anger rather than a reflection of her true feelings. She insisted we could rebuild, that we could try new ways of improving our intimacy. She brought up therapy, promised patience, and swore she would never wound me that way again. But my mind was already set. The woman I had once trusted completely had proven capable of striking at the very foundation of who I was. The essential trust and safety that hold a marriage together had been destroyed, and I could not see a way back. Despite her persistence in the days and weeks that followed, I remained resolute. What had begun with love and shared hope was ending, not because of one argument alone, but because her words had revealed a profound lack of respect and compatibility between us. The divorce proceeded with the same steady momentum that had characterized our relationship's decline. We divided belongings, separated our lives, and turned toward uncertain futures. The dreams we once cherished dissolved, replaced by the fragile hope that, apart, we might each eventually find peace with someone better suited to us. As months passed and the legal process unfolded, I had time to reflect on what had happened, and on what it revealed about the kind of partner I wanted to become. The experience left lasting impressions I am still uncovering. I came to understand the extraordinary power of words. They can mend and bring comfort, but they can also destroy. The one you entrust with your heart has the greatest ability to wound it. Our marriage didn't unravel solely from physical or emotional difficulties, but from a few sentences spoken in anger, sentences that revealed unsettling truths. I realized that respect and kindness are indispensable in any close relationship, especially in moments of conflict or disappointment. Her attack on my masculinity had not just ended our marriage. It had altered forever the way I viewed intimacy, trust, and vulnerability. Certain truths, once spoken, cannot be retracted, and no amount of affection can undo the harm they cause. Restoring my confidence, particularly in myself as a man, took time. The seeds of doubt she planted grew into larger insecurities, shaping how I related to others, especially women, and how I regarded myself. Eventually, I sought therapy to process the damage, to understand what had happened, and to learn how to move forward. In therapy, I came to realize that Sharon's words reflected more about her inability to handle conflict than about my value as a partner. I learned that striking at someone's core identity during an argument is a form of emotional abuse, one that leaves deep and lasting scars. What she did wasn't merely unkind, it was profoundly destructive. And I saw that healthy relationships depend on being able to express dissatisfaction without demeaning a partner's dignity. Ultimately, her choice of words revealed an absence of empathy and maturity that made the marriage unsustainable. Looking back, I see that if we had been able to confront our challenges, particularly in the bedroom, with openness and respect, the outcome might have been very different. If she had chosen to express her concerns earlier and done so with kindness, there might have been room for us to address the problems in our intimate life together. But instead, following our split, I was left sorting through the emotional wreckage alone, attempting to rebuild both my self-worth and my understanding of closeness with others. The damage Sharon did to my sense of identity didn't vanish with time. It demanded deliberate effort and professional support to begin healing. I became hesitant about pursuing new relationships, haunted by the possibility that another partner might hide similar grievances or use my vulnerabilities as weapons during conflict. Trust, which once came effortlessly to me, now felt fragile, something to be earned slowly and with caution. Through ongoing therapy and introspection, I gradually came to understand that Sharon's behavior wasn't representative of what emotionally balanced individuals bring into a relationship. I learned to distinguish between constructive feedback meant to strengthen a connection and language designed to erode a partner's confidence and stability. Equally important was learning to draw firm lines around how conflict should be handled in future relationships. That period in my life taught me that certain ways of communicating are simply unacceptable, no matter how justified someone might feel in their frustration or anger. I realized that issues must be addressed directly and early, not left to simmer until they explode into something much harder to fix. I started to value calm, honest conversation over reactive outbursts. I also became more mindful of how potential partners interacted with others, how they treated service staff, what they said about past relationships, and how they handled small disagreements during the early stages. These seemingly minor behaviors often reveal how someone might behave once the novelty of a new relationship fades. Our divorce was finalized around 8 months after I filed. My attorney mentioned that this was fairly standard for a case without children or complex financial entanglements. During that time, Sharon and I had little direct communication. Our exchanges were limited to legal matters, handled by our respective lawyers. When the final documents were signed, I felt both a quiet relief and a lingering sadness. The relief came from finally closing a chapter that had weighed heavily on me. It meant I could move forward, free from the ties that had held me back. The grief was for the dreams we once shared, dreams that would never become reality. Still, as I look ahead, I remain open to love, but I'll approach it with a clarity and care forged through painful experience. I'll be more intentional in choosing a partner, and more alert to the way we communicate from the very beginning. Sometimes the truths that surface in a relationship are the very things that end it. What Sharon eventually told me had likely been on her mind for a while, but the way she chose to say it closed the door on any hope of reconciliation. The man who had once fought so hard to preserve his marriage came to understand that not all marriages are meant to be saved. Her words, intended to express dissatisfaction, became the final blow to everything we had built, leaving us both with the burden of loss and the clarity that came with it. From a distance, I can now say that as painful as her words were, they freed me from a relationship that had become emotionally corrosive and unsustainable. Yes, her cruelty left deep wounds, but they were wounds that eventually healed. Staying would have only deepened the harm, gradually eroding the last of my self-respect. After that moment, my perception of her changed permanently, and I knew it would never return to what it had once been. Some things once said alter the course of a relationship forever. What ultimately ended our marriage wasn't something physical. It was a fracture in character. And with that, I close this chapter of my life. Thank you for hearing my story. If any part of it resonated with you, feel free to explore more of the content shared here. Until we meet again, take care.